Hotel maids of Reddit, what was the most disturbing thing you found while cleaning out a room? Hearing about ice cube trays perfectly filled with human tea being found in the minibar at the Hilton stopped me from ever using ice cube trays in hotels again. I had a summer job cleaning hotel rooms. One day a co-worker told me she walked into her first room that day and the first thing she saw, neatly arranged on the desk, were 3 dildos. A note saying please wash, comma, and a 20 crown note, about $2. She didn't. How are you not even going to leave at least $1 per DLDO? Unreal. I work at a hotel but not a maid myself. Though one day a maid found a woman who committed suicide. She checked in so her family would not be forced to find the body. It was the middle of the day and the hotel was mostly clear of people. Nobody heard the gunshot and we have concrete floors that stopped the bullet from traveling out of the room. The way it was described to me was it was relatively clean. She lied in bed and put a pillow on her head and shot through it towards the ground. It wasn't until the cops came that blood got everywhere. The maid soon quit afterwards. This is extremely common in Las Vegas. We're the second most common suicide destination in the United States behind the Golden Gate Bridge. The hotels do their best to bury that information. But when people jump off buildings, parking garages are probably the most common. But 6 have managed to jump off the top of the stratosphere. It's considered a public suicide and will make the news. Naked man in bath. I was 16. Knocked and called loudly before I walked in. He sat there with a big creepy grin on his face and visible erection. Gross. I worked as a housekeeper in a small motel for maybe 2 months. One day we had to clean a room covered completely in paper towels. Everything was covered. The bed. The chairs. The floor. Not horrific. But weird. This next one is why I hated my job. And was happy to have gotten fired. We had to clean a room covered in tea. Human poo. On the bed. On the towels. Everywhere but the toilet. The towels were twisted. And covered like they had been shoved up someone's rectum. And to top it all off, when I asked about being able to use gloves, I was told no. Just grab the tea covered stuff by the edges where they were tea free. Go, I hated that place. So many health hazards and OSHA violations. It pisses me off to think that some employers are such assholes that they don't gaff about their employees. I'm also surprised at the number of people who found tea covered rooms. Or tea in the bed. Like, that's what you're sleeping. Some people really are animals. I was a housekeeper on an island resort. And we had contractors living there during the week building a new high-rise. They would go home for the weekend and we had to clean their tea. They were getting free accommodation. And didn't give us tea. They were always FK'd. Weak old plates of food. Spilled bong water, etc. But the most confusing moment was in the bottom of a fridge. There was a layer of sand a couple of cm thick. And rock hard. So I proceed to chip away at the sand biscuit, and as I do so, I start to see small curly hairs appearing. Loads of them. To this day I still don't know how so many pubes got into the sand. In the bottom of a mini fridge. And what acted as the binding agent. Not sure I want to know. Really. I wasn't a hotel maid. But a maid for one of those rent-a-maid companies where we'd have weekly appointments at people's homes. One family had a teenage daughter who had the flu. And she had vomited all over the bathroom floor. They didn't clean it up because they knew I was coming the next day. I did it. Begrudgingly. Expecting to get a $20 tip or something. Didn't get so much as a thank you. I was fired shortly thereafter for not cleaning well enough. I was not all that upset. And here we are. Cleaning because the maids come tomorrow and we don't want them to think we're filthy animals. Late to another post. My grandma used to clean hotel rooms and I used to go with her because it's a laid back job and nobody else could watch me. My grandma was cleaning and I was sitting on the counter playing my DS. I wanted to get a drink, so checked to see if there was ice in the freezer. There was no ice. But there was a popsicle box. I got so excited. I ran into the bathroom and asked my grandmother if I could have a popsicle. Assuming they were in plastic wrap. She said yes. I ran back to the freezer and reached into the cardboard box and pulled out a long, purple DLDO covered in tea. Human fesses. I was 7. What flavor was it? Not a hotel maid story. But my brother used to do cleaning maintenance work for the dorm buildings at his university. A water pipe burst in one of the dorm buildings over winter break. So he had to go into a bunch of people's rooms to box up their stuff and check for water damage. One of the rooms he had to enter was absolutely wallpapered with photos of a female student. There were hundreds of weird candid shots taken of her around campus. Sitting in class. Eating in the dining hall. etc. Printed out on printer paper and stuck up all over the walls. A university staff member had unlocked the door for him. And when they realized what they were looking at, she told him to leave and Ray locked the room. My brother never found out what was going on. But he was called back to do final cleaning of that same room, now totally empty, a couple of weeks later. Whoever was living there had left the dorm or been kicked out. Well, why would he stay after he killed that woman and ate all her hair? I worked as a cleaner in a hostel in Amsterdam. I have had to clean some nasty things and some amusing. Some of the more memorable are used condoms, bloody tampons pads, various sex toys, box of nail clippings, many bags of drugs, sticky rubber duck, Book of Mormon, Satanic Bible, so much poop, blood, vomit, cum. I have been assaulted many times in work. While I closed one bathroom to clean it, I had a man push me to the wall, walk in and start pissing on the floor in front of me. Also the wankers. So many men would lie in their beds masturbating while I cleaned the room around them. Also one time I found a bunch of newspaper clippings on a murder that had happened in Belgium. Later on there was a news segment that this murderer was thought to be in Amsterdam and a photo of the man was put up. It was the same man who had stayed at my work. We phoned the police but he had checked out by then. Why the FCK do you clean the room while they sit there wanking? Why don't you just leave? This isn't an answer to the question posed but a question I am posing. When I travel and get like a 6-pack of beer and then only drink like 4 or 5. And I'll leave the extra behind in the mini fridge. Do you guys like that? Like, does that go to you? Or do you have to throw it out even though it's unopened and brand new? Cause I do that often and was just curious if I was wasting booze or not. GF works housekeeping and just yelled out from the bed after I read this aloud that she loves you. We regard booze as the highest form of loot. I worked on the front desk of a hotel for 7 years. Housekeeping is very hard work physically and timing is everything. If a room was a checkout, they had 22 minutes to ensure it was back to perfect. Plus their pay conditions are really poor. Anyway, various items over the years were found including drugs. The biggest find was a gun. This is in Australia where we don't really do the whole gun thing. It was found under the bed. It was impossible to trace it back to a guest as beds were only vacuumed under every 6 months. Obviously the police were called in. Another unique find was an untouched room. Basically Chinese tour groups would stay with us and occasionally some would run away. They would leave the hotel in the early hours of the morning through the front door, viewed on CCTV. They planned to seek a better life in Australia. They would only take with them the luggage they had. Should their attempt fail, they can return to any airport and get on a flight back to China. But they will never be allowed to leave China ever again. Dear hotel maids, I apologize for the time my husband drank 2 bottles of Sutter Home and half a dozen chocolate brownies and then spent the night crying and puking in the bathtub, the toilet, the sink, everywhere. I tried my best to clean up what I could, but I'm sure the stink alone ruined your day. I did leave an extra tip. I am so sorry. He has promised never to do it again. Edit. My husband is getting a kick out of everyone's assumptions about him, me, and our relationship. Good ole Reddit. You crazy kids. 2 bottles of Sutter Home and half a dozen chocolate brownies and then spent the night crying and puking. Is your husband a depressed bulimic college age female? We had a lady who cleaned hotels tell us about the time she walked in and there were 10 severed heads in the bathtub with the hotel water running. Immediately left the room and had the manager call the police. Tons of police come to investigate with multiple guys with earpieces in place. The gentleman whose room it was came back and was immediately taken down. Turns out he was in charge of an end cadaver lab being held the next AM and needed to thaw the specimens. Tough to explain, but it got sorted out once the heads were all accounted for. 5 years in hotel security. Some females have very heavy flows and don't prepare themselves before bed. Several times housekeepers thought it was a crime scene and called us. Also lots of unsecured and loaded firearms. I would just unload them and lock them in the guest's safe, then change the code so they could have a short lecture before getting it back. I used to work part-time as one. I'm a man, so not exactly a maid. Once, I found a sticky yellow DLDO with a smell that will suffocate your soul and scar you for life. It was shaped like a deformed Neptune's trident, with 2 honkin' big poles and a smaller pole. Not even half the size of the first 2. I hope they are called poles since I'm not a dildonger. I have heard of rabbit vibrators, since my GF has one, but not a 3-headed one. It was stuck under the mattress, leaving the middle of it a little sickly green. So yeah. FCKU. Neptune's wife. Upvoting for Dildonganeer. Like most posts here, I shall start with I am not a hotel maid, but upon moving into a rented place with a few housemates, the landlord who had lived there previously had left lots of stuff. This landlord's behavior was odd. She was always super paranoid about what we were doing in the house and she would try and make up any excuse to get in and nosy around. Now, first gross thing we found was 2 bed bases she had left and refused to take. They were covered in dried blood. Second thing was some of her underwear on top of the kitchen cabinets that were really dirty. Third thing was the sound of children's toys from the attic that would play in the middle of the night. On occasion we tried checking up there but couldn't see anything. It was all a bit creepy. I don't know which maid ended up having to find this, but a couple of days ago on a road trip, I broke off one of my incisors eating cubido. I know, hard to do with ground meat. About a centimeter long chunk. Everything but the root. I kept the tooth and had it on the desk in my hotel room. At one point I accidentally knocked it onto the floor and I thought I need to remember to pick that up before I leave. I didn't remember. So I'm just hoping the maid vacuumed it up without noticing what it was. Late, but I worked as housekeeping in a hotel for a few months when I was 18. The normal nasty things you tend to see is completely trashed bathrooms. One room which was occupied by construction workers constantly had a clogged toilet. After the second time of dealing with it, I ignored it. I've also had a woman somehow catch the bed on fire while I was cleaning her bathroom. He didn't have any way to communicate to other associates, so I had to run down from the 3rd floor to the 1st to get the manager. The absolute worst thing I've had to deal with was when I kept turning down the offers of sex to the room of 2 military men. They got super offended that I wasn't interested and went so far to trash the room. Took boxes of Cheez-Its and crushed them all over the floor. So many wasted Cheez-Its smashed into the carpet. Beer cans thrown everywhere. Trash stuffed between the mattresses. Rolls of toilet paper shoved in the toilet. Poop on the walls. It was ridiculous. Manager here. I had a group of high school kids in house one night and the teachers chaperoning the group were non-existent. During the night we got constant complaints about noise from the room. When I went up there, all 30+ kids were in this one room. I kicked them out and sent them back to their rooms, but the best part was the next day. I got the call from the housekeeper that the room was trashed. As I went in to inspect the room, we found tons of used condoms and piss all over the bathroom. Not only did we charge the school damage costs for the room, but I also got the pleasure of telling the superintendent of the school that there was a 30+ kid orgy in the room and the chaperones we know where to be found. What a great day. Suicide in a bathtub soup. He'd been in there for 2 days. Not the best thread to read while in a hotel. Let me tell you. Not a hotel maid, see username, but I did walk in on a guy f-king an inflatable dinosaur pool toy by holding its legs together and thrusting through them. Purple Brontosaurus. For the curious. My dad committed suicide in a hotel room back in 2004. He shot himself in the head and housekeeping found him the next day. I have always wondered if it affected the individual who discovered him. I can't imagine. After reading several, we weren't provided gloves to deal with human feces, blood and other bodily fluids. These are biohazards. You need to speak with your management, and if they don't agree to provide you the proper equipment, contact OSHA 1-800-321-6742. Your employer is required to understand their responsibilities to provide a safe workplace and their employees. Workers have a right to a safe workplace. The law requires employers to provide their employees with safe and healthful workplaces. The OSHA law also prohibits employers from retaliating against employees for exercising their rights under the law, including the right to raise a health and safety concern or report an injury. For more information, see www. Whistleblowers. Gov or workers' rights under the OSHA Act. I worked housekeeping at an upscale beach and during high school. These people would be paying $600 $700/night per person. So you would think they would have some class. I've found dirty vibrators, cum poop covered duvets, and have walked in on people doing the dirty even though it was after checkout time and I knocked multiple times. Some foreign families thought it was okay to bring in electric hot pans and cook chicken curry 24/7, leaving a greasy and smelly mess in the room. List goes on. But those are the ones that stick out the most. When I was 16, I worked for a Super 8 in Southern Isle. I walked into the room and instantly smelled feces. But nothing looked nasty, so I went about stripping the beds and going about my business. I was nearly done with the room and still confused about the odor until I got to the coffee pot. Someone had tea where the coffee's grounds were supposed to go and made a pot of hot tea water. I just bagged and threw the whole thing away in the dumpster. I went to the owner and told them what had happened and to request a new pot. I was told to retrieve the old one and just bleach it. I quit right then and there. I still refuse to use coffee pots when I am staying at hotel. Well, some poor soul found David Carradine. Finally, a question I can answer. To start off, I'll say that a surprising percentage of guests are actually filthy FCKing animals and their rooms are goddamn disgusting. Tons of unflushed TTY toilets daily. Often tea stains on parts of the toilet that I can't even imagine how they got there. Food and garbage strewn about everywhere is a common occurrence. I've had buckets of popcorn just emptied all over the floor. Confetti covering the room. You name it. Always a pleasure to clean up. Sometimes they leave the bathtub stoppered and filled with vile, strangely colored water. And there's no good way to reach in there and unplug it with our flimsy wrist-length gloves. Honestly, I could go on. But there's just too much to cover. I would say that the most disturbing thing was just how many moderately disturbing things I'd see on a daily basis. I can't think of any one particularly traumatic event, like a dead body or anything. Though I always hoped to find one so I could get the day off work. Worked front desk at a hotel in Anchorage. There was a native convention going on in town, so every hotel was packed. I get a call for some towels and decided to run them up myself. When they opened the door, I immediately got a face full of the most disgustingly fishy smell. Right inside the door they had pulled a nightstand out and 4 ladies were gutting a seal with an ulu. Can't imagine how pissed the housekeeping staff was about that. I about gagged from the smell of it. And from the looks of it, they weren't trying very hard to keep the guts and juices from getting everywhere. Stories from people who are not maids. But, like every freaking Ask Reddit thread asking about something specific. Pillar drivers of Reddit. What's the most? Not a pillar driver, but I work with cats. My first week working for what is now a Trump hotel. I was shadowing a more experienced housekeeper. On my second day of training we found a massive pink DLDO. Hotel policy for lost and found items is that we had to write them up and phone the customer to ask if they would like us to send the item back to them. They did not want their pink lady's toy to be returned. Not a hotel maid. Just a regular housemaid here. I once walked into a room that was littered with dirty clothes and old food. There were stems from rotten grapes scattered on the bed and bread that was so old it almost disintegrated at the touch. Sitting on the bed was a laptop. Open but turned off. A bottle of lotion and a roll of toilet paper. Seemingly normal for a 20-year-old boy. Next to the bed was a black chair full of white spots on the seat. Sitting next to the chair, scattered about and obviously used, was a penis pump. Then on the dresser was a small Jesus statue turned away towards the window. Look away. Jesus. Look away.